Hello and welcome to Australia Unshackled. Today is June 1st, 2010. My name is Glenn and thanks for joining us. The show today is going to focus in on the just announced 5 key flagship campaigns that the Citizens Electoral Council is going to be running in the upcoming federal election. These 5 key campaigns were announced back a month ago at the CEC National Conference, National Activists Conference, and the details of that are in our latest New Citizen newspaper, which goes right through the policies. Now, just so you guys know out there what these 5 candidates are going to be representing and who they are, leading off and leading these 5 campaigns will be Craig Isherwood, CEC founder. He's going to be running here in Victoria in the seat of Wills against Kelvin Thomson. Now, we're going to catch up with Craig Isherwood on the show today. Catherine, my co-host, will be interviewing Craig on the campaign and what the key policies of the campaign will be. Now, going around the country, up in Queensland, our State Secretary, Jan Pacalis, is running in the seat of Griffith against Kevin Rudd himself. In New South Wales, Anne Lawler, our State Secretary for New South Wales, will be running in the seat of Charlton against Greg Combay. Over in Western Australia, Jean Robinson, our State Secretary there, is running in the seat of O'Connor against Wilson Tuckey. Down in Tasmania, we have Adrian Watts running in the seat of Bass to replace the outgoing Jodie Campbell. So these 5 campaigns are going to be part of a nationwide focus on the CEC's policies for an economic recovery. To know more about that, we're going to jump across to the interview with with Craig Isherwood.
Well, thanks for joining us, Craig.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's the second time you've come around and had an interview with us. And this time the interview is based around the fact that we've just put out our latest New Citizen, Enact Glass-Steagall Now, and you addressed the conference, the Citizens Electoral Council's activist conference, for around hammering the genocidal policies, and in particular the genocidal policies of Kelvin Thomson, who is in our backyard, the seat of Wills, who is now calling for a population reduction. Given how he does it and how you do that, you know, there's a lot of things we'll probably go into, but if you want to start with just what you went through in the New Citizen.
Well, look, this New Citizen really does hit the crucial issue for the world today, and particularly for Australia. The world is in a breakdown crisis. The financial and monetary system is in a full-on breakdown crisis. And recently, in the last couple of days, you've seen the Spanish banks have been reported were actually downgraded. And as Mr. LaRouche has forecast, several months ago, the fact is that the entire Spanish banking system is in a process of disintegration. Well,
and the whole banking system as a whole.
The only solution for the world today is that we go back to the policies that were enacted under Roosevelt called the Glass-Steagall. They were enacted in 1933, which basically said we're going to get rid of the debt, that is to get rid of the gambling debts that are built up in the financial and monetary system. We're actually going to write them off. And to do that, you have legislation that separates out the legitimate banking functions in the economy, the legitimate banking functions, as opposed to the gambling side of the banking functions. The gambling side includes things like all the derivatives holdings, the collateralised debt obligations and credit default swaps and all these fictitious monetary financial instruments that are built up in the system in the last 30 to 40 years. Now, what is happening right now is the British Empire is absolutely fanatical about trying to save its system.
Which is actually dead, which is the funny thing about it.
Yeah, it's dead. But to save it, their solution, as Prince Philip has made very clear, is to kill people. To reduce the world's population from the 6.8 billion people we have today to below 2 billion. And the way they do that is through continuing to implement these policies of globalisation, of free trade and economic rationalism. Now, here in Australia, the lead poster boy for that campaign, particularly on population reduction, is the guy in our backyard, Kelvin Thomson. Now, he has been very sneaky in the last 15 years. He hasn't really told his constituency what he stands for. But this guy has
He's now starting to come out of the
well, he's starting to because
closet.
there's been a momentum over the last couple of years.
It started with global warming, didn't it?
It did. What's happened is under economic rationalism, under the process of deregulation, of free trade and globalisation, you've had a shutdown in the development of our physical economy. That means things like decent hospital care, decent education, decent roads, rebuilding bridges, building high-speed mass transit systems. And we proposed the Australian Ring Road, which would open up the entirety of our country. But what Kelvin Thomson says is that we're overpopulated with a ridiculous 22 million people, this massive continent, and we're overpopulated. So his agenda actually...
And one of his things is that we don't have enough food because we're overpopulated. We don't have enough water because we're overpopulated.
Yes. But
and the thing is, as you were saying, why don't they actually get to work and build them?
Well, that's the policy that we've had for the last 40 years. So the trick has been, don't look at the real economic policies that have destroyed this country, which are British policies of free trade. Reduce the population, get rid of people. So he is calling for the population to be held at 26 million people.
And one of these things, the ideology which is parallel to Kelvin Thomson is Prince Philip, who actually said that population is an environmental threat. So now they're making it an environmental issue, which is actually the agenda all along.
Exactly
Because global warming didn't work.
Yes.
They couldn't shut down with the emissions trading scheme. That would allow infrastructure to be diminished even further, which would shut down the population. And now, so they couldn't get that, so now they're going for the nut of the issue, which was the issue to begin with.
The issue,
population.
Yeah, the issue that Kelvin Thomson champions, it's actually the idea of what is a human being. And you have, right throughout history, you have this tussle, or this struggle between the idea of what is man, or who is man.
Is it creative, or is it just a beast that, is to be culled and herded?
Well, human beings, as Mr. LaRouche has made very clear, we are not animals. The laws of ecology don't apply to us as human beings because we have been given creative reason. In fact, we're endowed with this quality that can make discoveries of the physical principles that govern the universe, which are actually unseen. Now, we have our senses, but those senses see like impressions or shadows of these underlying physical processes, these physical principles. Now, human beings, unlike other animals, we can discover what those physical principles are and then harness them, use them in science and technology to transform our environment. And the classic example of that is the use of fire, or in our case, what we propose is the use of nuclear energy.
And the fact that we're not doing that and allowing ourselves to grow as a human being to be able to develop those technologies is actually making us go the opposite direction.
That's the problem.
It's bestial.
What Kelvin Thomson is saying is that human beings are beasts.
And they're not creative.
They're not creative. The human beings are just like animals. And that's the lie. That means his policies, whatever they are, starting from that position, have a genocidal impulse.
Yeah, because they're guided by everything else under that premise.
Exactly. Because that is, if you take, for example, look at who's associated with. Sustainable Population Australia, right? Who are the key honchos in this particular organisation? Well, you've got the president of the Australian Conservation Foundation. Who founded the Australian Conservation Foundation? Prince Philip. Prince Philip chaired the Australian Conservation Foundation personally from 1971 to 76. This is the same Prince Philip that believes that if he had a chance to be reincarnated, he'd like to come back as a deadly virus in order to solve the world's overpopulation. So you have the head of the same organisation, the Australian Conservation Foundation, sitting on the board as a patron, actually, of the Sustainable Population Australia organisation. And you have a number of these types of people in that organisation. And this SPA organisation is promoting Kelvin Thomson. In fact, they're a bit disappointed that Thomson didn't become the population minister.
Well, the fact that we've even got a population minister now is one of the reasons we probably have a population minister is because of Kelvin Thomson.
Well, he actually...
because he's the forefront.
Yeah, he was very proud of the fact, or his group, the SPA and others, were very proud of the fact that Rudd moved to get a population minister. But there's been a lot of pressure over the last 30 years to have a population policy because it's actually designed to reduce Australia's population. That's the idea. And people like Tim Flannery, Professor Tim Flannery, the paleontologist, this kook, this nutter, He reckons, he actually said back in 1996 or
Mhm.
thereabouts, that Australia's population should be as low as 6 million
Yeah,
people.
right.
So here you have Kelvin Thomson standing up saying, re-elect me for the seat of Wills. And
With no fight on the other people, he just takes it on a silver platter that he would get elected.
Well, this is a very safe Labor Party seat,
Mhm.
but what is really quite astonishing is that most people don't know that he stands for this particular policy.
Well, I was just going to say that he gave a speech a couple of months ago, back last year, I think it was November or December, it was around that period, and he came out and gave, we've got too much concrete and this is why people are depressed and we're overpopulated, blah, blah, blah. And the fact that he said this in Parliament as a parliamentary speech, it was called a grievance speech, and nobody within the Labor Party actually stood up officially and said, well, Kelvin Thomson, what the hell are you doing? They condoned it by, whether they said nothing, because they did nothing, they were condoning it by saying nothing. And that's the thing, people aren't giving him a run for the money and actually challenging him on the policies, and as you said, they probably don't even know what the policies are, with the population don't.
It comes back to the issue of understanding what actual physical economy is.
Mm-hmm.
What we have ruining our country and the world today is this monetarist policy that is built around British free trade. So most economists
Which
have
doesn't
no
encourage development whatsoever.
No. Most economists have no idea actually how an economy works. An economy works by actually developing the creative abilities of each and every human being.
And this was LaRouche's method.
Right. And more human beings you have, and the more you foster the creative development, the more you can make discoveries of those unseen physical principles that we don't know about yet to solve the problems that we have today.
Exactly.
Right.
So if we've got
That's
problems,
why-
we can solve them. It's
that's
called a
why-
human being's head.
That's why Mr. LaRouche has proposed, for example, that we go to Mars.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's many, many aspects of our universe that we have no idea how they function. Now, if you try to put an astronaut into space and get them to Mars, under current technologies, it takes something like 300 to 360 days.
You're going to have a lot of jelly.
You're going to have a blob in that astronaut by the time you get to Mars because the human body is built for a gravity field of the human Earth, so the human on Earth. So how do you replicate that gravity field so you don't end up having astronauts that turn up as blobs? But more importantly, how do you get to Mars within a very short period of time, like 2 to 3 days? So Mr. LaRouche has been calling for the ability to replicate the Earth's gravity in travel to Mars, for a start. That means relativistic speeds that are getting faster and closer and closer to the speed of light. That's what relativistic means, right? So
And
you're getting very, very fast.
Lyndon LaRouche was actually talking about this when he addressed the conference to Australia at this May seminar.
That's right. And Mr. LaRouche reiterated about the need for us to understand the universe, and he's very specific about this idea of understanding cosmic radiation,
Right.
which is the fact that a lot of the current scientists think that space is empty, there's nothing in space. Well, it's actually full of this cosmic radiation, and cosmic radiation takes all different forms. It takes things like cosmic rays. You've got all sorts of different forms of radiation from that you can see. The visible light is a form of radiation. You've got infrared, you've got ultraviolet, and these all impact on our universe, on our biosphere right now. And mostly we have no idea how these things actually work.
A
So
lot of people to begin with, wouldn't even know what a biosphere is.
That's a
And
problem.
this is the issue. This is the problem.
Well, that's why we have to. If you take the issue of education, the most important thing is to give a child the ability to make discoveries, real discoveries, not a textbook where they go and look up the answer, but discoveries of principle. So they learn that their mind is in fact creative.
And they're understanding how that principle came about, or that principle actually exists and how it exists.
That
How
they
it came to be
more,
like that
more
as
that the
well.
nature of a human being is that we are creative, right? Now, if you have creative human beings, and many of them all making, or at least striving to have
You wouldn't have a
discoveries,
Kelvin Thomson.
you don't need to reduce the world's population. In fact, you need to increase it because you're increasing the potential for that creativity. And we solve a lot of the problems. And the very problems that he cites, like congestions on the roads, all those sorts of things, are complete reactions to a shutdown of the development of our physical economy. But it's, as I said before, it's more important to understand that comes from the philosophy that human beings are nothing more than animals, which is not the Christian viewpoint.
Because that's what he shows when he says that you can't really change this, it's just overpopulation. He denies creativity.
He denies creativity, and that's the issue.
Right.
That's the political issue for us in this country, because here we are, 22 million people. We're an empty continent. We have vast capacity to develop ourselves.
Well, you look at the satellites from NASA and the lights all around the coast of the country. They're not within the central part, and we could be having 18 water projects all around the country to green the whole thing. Yeah, but it's not.
And I think it's a very pessimistic policy. We've got to shut down population growth in order to deal to conserve resources. It's
a lot of people wouldn't even know that your member of parliament wants to kill you.
Well,
because that's the effect.
This issue for him, so he would deny that.
But as an effect, it is killing people. Well, and it denies
he would deny that because it's not a nice thing to say. But in effect, if you deny the creativity of human beings, you take away the ability to create fire, that is nuclear power, to create forms of energy to solve problems of scarce resources. For example, we're a very rich country in the sense of minerals. We go and we send the big bulldozers and the backhoes in and the excavators, and we dig out billions, trillions of dollars worth of wealth in things like iron ore. Now that iron ore is actually a fossil of living processes that millions of years ago you had iron molecules spread diffusely across the surface of the planet, and you had microbes concentrate that iron into these very rich deposits.
Well, when you die and you go down in the ground, because you'll eventually either get cremated or go underground, you'll eventually, in a few million years, hopefully become something like that, yeah?
Well, we'd
That's how it works.
We'd have lots and lots of people piled up to get the filters. Well, the concentration by the microbes into these ore deposits means that we can come along and dig these very rich ore deposits up. The microbes created them. The animals are long gone.
Okay.
But the microbes created these rich deposits of minerals.
Okay.
But the point is, as we come along and dig all those minerals out, we deplete them. They're no longer there. So how do we end up getting... and those minerals, for example, are then processed into other sorts of fossils like steel, and they're fossils because they're the process of our human creativity, our human thought. So, whereas the ore is a fossil in a sense of a living process, the steel is a fossil of our thought processes, our noetic processes, as Mr. LaRouche says. But the key, the point is that...
Because it wasn't in a textbook on how to get steel out of the ground and what to use it for.
We had to discover it, which is what makes us unique. But the problem is we're losing those rich deposits of minerals.
So what do we do?
Well, that's why we have to have an increasing energy flux density, an increase of energy to be able to create those diffuse minerals from other sources. Now, you can get minerals out of seawater, for example, so therefore if you had high temperature nuclear processes, you could desalinate seawater, you could also take other minerals out of that. You can also then move into what Mr. LaRouche has talked about many times, thermonuclear fusion, which is the next step after nuclear fission, whereby you can reprocess scrap and waste to actually bring down and recover the elements inside that scrap. But see, that requires us to make more discoveries of physical principles through developing our creativity. Now, if you shut down that and say that human beings are nothing more than animals, that we're no different than a cow, and I haven't seen a cow manufacturing a steel bar or anything, if you shut that down, then you will kill people.
Exactly. Same thing with with solar energy and windmills. The energy is not... You spend more energy trying to build those windmills and solar panels than what you get out of the energy.
Yeah. So, but this fight that Mr. Kelvin Thomson represents it's been a long fight. I mean, it goes back...
So it's not just Kelvin Thomson.
No, he's the past president of the Fabian Society here in Australia, which is a big teller of itself. The founders of that were H.G. Wells in particular. You also had the most evil man of the 20th century, as Mr. LaRouche referred to him, Bertrand Russell.
Oh, dirty birdie.
These guys adopted the philosophy of a guy by the name of Thomas Malthus, who basically put forward the proposal that population grows geometrically, whereas the ability to feed ourselves only grows arithmetically. That means that what you have is an inability, according to them, for people to produce enough food to feed this greatly expanding population.
And so because there isn't enough food to go around for this growing population, you have to try and work out ways that you can reduce the population.
Yes.
So that the food supply is equal to the amount of people.
But a classic example is you take the Murray-Darling Basin, which is an absolutely incredible food bowl. It's desolate.
We're actually causing our own destruction.
That's the problem. If you have a look at the Murray-Darling Basin, it is an incredible food bowl. We've shut down water projects in the last 30 years, so the water isn't
Deliberately.
there. Deliberately. You've had drought in this country. You could have built the Snowy River Scheme Stage 2. You could have built the Clarence River Scheme. You could build other schemes along the eastern coast to feed into the whole Murray-Darling system. But that hasn't been done. Why? Because the prevailing policies for the last 40 years has been the policy of globalisation and free trade, which is the policy of Kelvin Thomson. And that policy is what is destroying our country.
So rather than actually trying to band-aid over the problem and, have 3-minute showers rather than 6-minute showers because we don't have enough water, let's actually build some more water projects because the population has actually grown.
Or go and build nuclear desalination plants. We're an island country. We've got water all around us. Just take some of that water and desalinate it using nuclear processes. We have the world's largest reserves of thorium, which is a radioactive material. Also the third largest reserves of an element, as we know, called uranium. We're surrounded by this stuff, but we're not using it.
We might have to go into this later, but I'm going to touch on it now. For people out there that are thinking, well, thorium, oh my goodness, so uranium, oh my goodness, I'm going to pull my hair out. Is it dangerous?
No. It's no dangerous than a kitchen knife that you use to cut your tomatoes with.
Right.
The point is, what is it used for? And the good thing about thorium and the new generation nuclear reactors is that they are inherently safe. Now, we would like to see, the CEC would like to see lots and lots of high temperature gas-cooled modular nuclear reactors. Now, these are nuclear reactors that could be built on an assembly line like you produce a car. They're modular, which means that they can go anywhere. And they're also, you get them in a pebble bed form, where the actual nuclear fuel is encased in a ceramic. Now the ceramic...
So it's like a tennis ball.
It's like a tennis ball size, but it's encased in a ceramic which doesn't melt down at any of the temperatures that you could get up to inside the nuclear reactor itself. So that even, and you actually have to with these, it has what's called a negative energy coefficient, which means that you actually have to make the thing work. If you don't make it work, it'll stop working. And they usually place these things in the ground, and they're encased, so they're completely safe. They're inherently safe. So you have these things, they're 100, 200, 300 megawatts, and you can place them all around Australia.
And another question would be that many people at home might be thinking is, what about the waste?
Well, so that's another fallacy. The waste, these materials are made up of very rich nucleotides, elements actually that don't exist in rich forms within the crust of the Earth. But in these nuclear processes, they become part of the nuclear spent fuel. What's happened in the last 40 years is we've shut down the advanced technologies necessary to reprocess these fuels, to take out those valuable nucleotides and reuse them. Again, because the prevailing policy is globalisation, and the prevailing policies has been there's too many people. Prince Philip, I want to come back as a deadly virus, reduce the world's population down to 2 billion people. That's what Kelvin Thomson's hitched his wagon to, and in this Wills campaign, that's what I wanted people to know. That he doesn't represent any of the old policies of the old Labor Party whatsoever. He doesn't represent the ideals of the Labor Party as far as old Labor is concerned. We represent that more than he does. But there's a sleight of hand here. The population in this area doesn't know that.
So we have to tell
or
them.
Or they agree with him because they don't know what the folly is, the serious folly is of their thinking.
Well, see, a lot of the population wouldn't agree with their local MP in general.
Well,
That's the thing, because they, you know, they have this perception. You talk to people on the streets, oh, they look at politics as whinging and whining, and they have to go and vote. So they have to, you know, who are we going to vote for? So they go and vote. It's not about the votes necessarily, but the thing is, a lot of them don't agree, but they don't know what to do.
if you ask the average person, do you think the Australian government really is concerned about your welfare? And I think a lot of people would say no.
Hell no.
Right? Because the fact is that our governments are sold out to big business, the banking system. They won't take this on because
That's who
globalisation
they represent.
rules the political geometry,
Right.
the political dynamic of our country. What I represent in the leadership of this organisation is a different conception of man, a different philosophy, a different physical economic program where we put people first, and we put people first and we develop the country first. We put the banks back in their place, first and foremost. We get rid of the multinationals. We nationalise our national minerals, and we develop the place in a sane way for future generations.
And this was partly covered within the New Citizen, within the Glass-Steagall Act.
Yeah, well, that's part of the overall policies
Yes.
of Mr. LaRouche in terms of his Four Powers Agreement,
Yeah.
where the Glass-Steagall is the first part, where you put the entire world's banking system into bankruptcy reorganisation. You enact the Glass-Steagall to separate out the bad debt from the legitimate debt. You reorganise the banking system. You then, under the Four Powers Agreement that Mr. LaRouche is proposing, you have a fixed exchange rate system, and then you have sovereign credit created by countries, which most people don't know
Which is
about.
actually what the Labor Party were trying to do back in the old tradition,
Yes,
which was under King O'Malley with the National Bank.
and he used the National Bank, in the sense of the Commonwealth Bank, to build great infrastructure projects.
Which was structured under Alexander Hamilton's first national bank in America.
And that's what we have to go back to.
Exactly.
So the policies exist, the ideas exist, the capacity exists, people are creative. They just require the leadership necessary to take those ideas and say, well, we don't want this bum in there. We don't want this guy that's got policies that'll kill us. We want someone who will actually support the future posterity of the generations of Australia. We want more people to come to our country. We don't have enough people.
We could do that.
We can easily do that. But you actually have to have a vision for the future, and not this ideological genocide that you have coming through organisations like the Australian Conservation Foundation, Sustainable Population Association. These policies are genocidal. They're genocidal in their nature because they specifically deny the nature of human beings as created in the image of the Creator, with this quality of being able to make these discoveries of universal physical principles. They deny that. They say that human beings are nothing more than animals, and as the Australian Conservation Foundation itself has come out and said, human being or human population growth should be equated to being the same as cane toads or rabbits or other noxious pests.
Environmental menace.
So there's the proof in their policies that this is a genocidal approach to population issues.
Well, that's given us a lot of food for thought. And if people want to know more, if they want to mobilise with us, if they don't like what we've been talking about with this overpopulation disease, they should join us, and they should come out and get as many of these copies of the New Citizen as humanly possible, and get them out to your local MP, your community groups, the population around where you live, and start to initiate some leadership in your own backyard and take these people on. So thanks, Craig.
You're welcome.
And I hope to see you again.
Yeah, you will.
I'm sure we will.